Hello and good morning. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone. How's it going?
Good morning, gentlemen, and happy Tuesday to you.
Good morning, everyone. It is good to see your faces.
Faces are seen.
Faces are seen.
So let's get right into our topic today. We're here a little early, but we got to also end a little early as well. So who found this article? I don't remember where this article came from.
You did.
Did I find the article though? Was it me or was it somebody else? And it was
You
like,
put it on
this
the
sounds.
you found the article. You put it on the agenda. We figured out what it was about.
Well, this is something of I don't know. It was. I don't know if we are influencing the internet or if the internet is influencing us. I think it's probably a little bit of both ways here. But I believe we've talked about this one together on the internet before. And so I think we've in previous episodes, I've kind of alluded to or talked through this concept before with other people. The article today, which we'll put in the chat window, it's Jevons Paradox, the Demand for Insights is kind of the name of the topic or article for today. So I'll put that in the chat window.
I definitely know that you've brought up this paradox before in different chats, but we've never talked about it in this context. I don't think
so, but it kind of very much makes sense. So I guess we should just jump into the article here real quick. Let's talk about what is I don't even know how to say the name right. Jevons Paradox.
I think that's it.
Yeah, Jevons Paradox.
Jevons Paradox.
If he's French, Javon. So
Jevons.
No, I don't think he's French. I think he's
Jevons Paradox. Oh, we'll go with it.
So 19th century, right?
Yes.
When this paradox came out, as it's now known, as the article says, it's an example of a rebound effect, where the expected gains from efficiency are offset by changes in behavior. In the original case, as coal engines got more efficient, it got cheaper to generate each watt, which in turn simulated a ton more generation. So there's even an energy aspect of this right now. Like
it's technology.
As you drive down more inefficiencies in our consumption of
increases.
Energy, are you actually like they're conversing on how do you not have the rebound of exponential growth in energy again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conservation. But we're talking data and AI today, which this was a fun, thought-provoking little article, because I think where my mind's been initially is, this is going to drive efficiencies, and we're gonna see changes in patterns of probably less jobs in certain areas or something like this. And this kind of challenges that thought.
It does.
You know what's crazy too? I feel like we've all even felt this even in our early stages of Power BI.
I feel it.
If you feel it, can you feel me? Even in the early 1915s, the 2015, 2017, when we were getting Power BI, I think probably all of us were some of the experts in the room about Power BI. And you're like, the more I know, the faster things will be, the more efficient. But I think it made us more busy. We were incredible. I was as busy as you can be, and I was the Power BI guru, so to speak. And I think now it's even more relevant as we go into this now era of AI. I find it interesting though, just even when the platform Power BI came out, our jobs got busier.
Mm-hmm. And this is I've also heard this analogy used in the same way of talking about light pollution in the same way.
Yeah.
So previously, when you made light, you had to go make a candle, and it took a long time to make a candle, and you had to get all this wax together. And then as light kind of evolved, as the technology improved, right? So then, we're now having oil lamps, and so those are changing things. So now it's easier to produce the oil and have this lamp. And so now we start seeing lamps on streets. So every street corner gets a lamp, and people light them, turn them on, and cool. So then it goes even cheaper than that. So then the economy of electricity turns on, and electricity can transfer power very quickly and easily. And then we invent the light bulb, and then the light bulb becomes an LED light bulb. And now we have literally satellite images of the entire world showing us that there is no darkness. There's just constant light on all the time in certain portions, messing things up. So now we have this new consumption. We've consumed so much of light that we now have this thing called light pollution. You can't go find a place where it's dark enough to go watch the stars.
Well, yeah, it's the age-old question, like, what do people want? And again, going slightly back in time towards when Power BI really became apparent at organizations, you necessarily did not know that people needed these data solutions, or they needed the type of insights from Power BI, I think from business applications such as Power Apps to citizen developers. But
Mhm.
once those became available and became something that could be reachable by organizations very quickly, all
Yes.
of a sudden it's like, you know what, we actually could want, you know what would actually be a great
Mhm.
solution here. Not that those weren't solution problems before, but they became reachable.
What were the? Let me just ask this question here before we jump into this one. Before Power BI, what were the visualization tools you could use? Like Tableau, which
But it
supporting
wasn't
services,
accessible to
but
everyone.
none of those were all paid programs. Even just
paid
to get,
programs.
Expensive.
yeah.
Everything
So
was paid though.
yeah, Tableau was
To
like, I
some
think,
degree.
a minimum of $35 a year or something like that. There was some kind of price
Yeah.
that you had to pay for, even just to get the program. So there's this idea of like, from Jevons Paradox here, the cheaper you make something, the less cost you bring to something, the more it becomes
Mhm.
consumed. And so, we had Excel, and I think Tableau are probably my initial two visualization programs. So there's probably a bunch of other open source R and
Yep.
Python things you could go after
And
too,
if
but I
you look
wasn't
on
using
that,
them.
yeah, and if you look on the side of the box of the Tableau gift backs, it said modeling not included back in the day.
Modeling not included.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're equating it to you're equating cost to direct dollars, but
Totally.
I think one of the biggest challenges here that might be more applicable is the time cost,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Like we just didn't have systems that could handle like handle data loads, let alone data volume loads like we have them, because there were hardware constraints. Everybody
Yes.
owned their
Yes.
hardware. There
Agreed.
were software constraints. It took a lot of time to generate and build these like monolithic warehouses, and that was the approach that everybody was going to go down. And you have a lot of data challenges and all of that. And then so the visualization piece was certainly part of it,
Mhm.
but you didn't have systems, I think, that could support anything like that. So yeah, Tableau definitely from a visualization standpoint,
Yes.
like I think was the first in terms of providing a tool for end users to engage with data and pull insights out of larger data sets. So like kudos there.
Mhm.
But what Power BI did, I think, for us and for businesses in general, is it reduced the time or the cost of pulling all of this data together in such a way that was understandable for business users.
Yes.
Right. So you're lowering the level of knowledge that somebody has to have about all these back-end systems. And that's where my thoughts today around Jevons Paradox are,
Mm.
because I'm like, holy cow, like we've been talking about AI expediting, right?
Yes.
I don't as a code generator helper, right? I don't need to know all the code, right? I don't
Mhm.
need to know all these things. As it becomes more efficient, well, aren't we doing the same thing in reality? Like the thought today was like, wow, I wonder, did we just elevate all of data analysts into a
Mhm.
realm, and this is where Fabric comes in, into a realm that they otherwise would have to spend a lot of time to engage in? And I'm not saying we're at that point right now. There's still a lot of like the technology pieces, but eventually, did we become so efficient at reducing the complexity of a lot of the ELT, ETL processes and programs, and compiling data and applying business logic to make data meaningful, that you put businesses in a position of, hey, you know what, we become so efficient, we don't need all these people, or we're going to reduce the time that we need from people, like, hey, why don't you work less? Or are we going to capitalize that and hire more people because we don't want our competitors to beat us out?
Right. Well, in the middle paragraph towards the end here, it talks about the demand for data isn't fixed. So we're talking about a supply and demand curve, right?
Yeah.
So increasing supply also increases demand, or increase, if you decrease the cost, if you decrease the time to deliver these insights, if you decrease the effort it takes to make, to your point, Seth, a report, a thing like that, the more you decrease that load, the more people are going to demand more things. So, and this rings very true to me in my career, because it was a lot around, we need to build a data warehouse. Okay, well, let's spend some time deciding what the data warehouse was. Okay, let's figure what that thing looks like. Months go by, and now you have a universe, a thing created that you can go read. Well, now you don't have to do that as much. Now we're talking weeks or a month or less to be able to build some of these collection of data places. And I won't call them a warehouse yet, because I think there's more things that go along with a warehousing technology that you want to put in place. But I'm saying we can now collect data faster than ever, cheaper than ever, on local machines like my laptop. I mean, for me, it was the experience of, I made an Excel sheet that used Power Query, and I couldn't load anything more than 1 million rows of data. And even if you did load 1 million rows of data in Excel, it would be so stinking slow. It would just be so stinking slow.
Yeah.
But you don't want to. You want to move to Power Query, and then I can get tens of millions of rows. I remember having the moment of, hey, we'll build this little interim solution while we wait for the data warehouse to be built. A year later, we're not done. And a year later, we have 10 million rows in Excel. And I'm floored. I'm like, oh, wow, this just changed the game for me. I'm like, this is different.
Well,
this hits different.
And then it prompted you to be like, well, I'm just gonna go build this myself.
and that's where I was like, wow, if I'm given tools like Power Query and Excel where I can do things at 10 million rows in data, and I can figure it out myself, I can get stuff done, I'm just gonna do it myself. And so I won't wait on other teams to do this. Anyways, I'll pause there. There's so many more things to say about this.
That's an interesting take, because I think all of us here have a very good insight in terms of business and also technology. And I think part of the adoption I've seen with Power BI at an organization is they still treat it as the box of like it's bar charts and line charts, and that's all you can do.
Yes.
And that's why I usually ask at the beginning of a discovery, saying, imagine we're not talking about the report. You had $1 million, you had 1,000 people working for you. What would you have? And try to get them out of the box of what they perceive the technology can do. And usually that offers insights or solutions that are possible in the platform. And that's still, I think we're getting, I still think we're getting there with Power BI, much less Fabric or AI, where people are understanding the capabilities of Power BI. And now we're introducing with Fabric, we're introducing with some of the AI tools now from data modeling, and all from both the business and the developer on what's possible, which is kind of that, I think that crux point in when it comes to the Jevons Paradox on the more consumption because there's more demand for something. What that demand is right now.
Well, we've talked about this, I think, on the periphery as well, right? But it's I think the same concept where when we talk about self-service, there are challenges to either a way in which we've done it in the past, or from not, and I don't like the word administrative perspective here, but at the same time, like if we talk about data governance or quality of data and ensuring certain levels of accuracy and certification, like there's still holes in the self-service realm, right? Like people can build things inefficiently, they can spend tons of money that not knowing what they're doing. Like there are a lot of inefficiencies in bringing all of those people into this ecosystem, where I don't think we've solved it, but I think there has to be that adoption, like the roadmap for, okay, like we can get immediate business value, but how do we transform that into permanent business value? And I think that's the difference, because that we haven't solved yet. And maybe we become more efficient in both ways, right? In terms of not allowing, but having more people be able to do more, even more than they do not right now, right? Like what is 5 minutes to wow? We're not talking about a complex DAX statement. We're talking about a sum. But I think you take one of the examples, I think, Mike, you brought this up all the time. Like people go from like sum to time intelligence, right? I want to see how things change over time. And it was hugely complex from the standpoint that like you just jumped into the deep end of DAX. Well, in the future, did they? Right? If we have code generators that automatically allow a business user like, hey, I want to do this and this and this, and then it just happens. Well, that's a huge efficiency thing, and now
Yes.
they're much more powerful, right?
Yes.
So in some ways, I think maybe I'm starting to think about this in a, okay, well, if I can explode the usership of all of these reporting tools because we've driven down the efficiency so much, can I do it in the other direction? Can I simplify the process by which we get into certified data sets and governance, and a way in which the data systems work and operate in an expected fashion across the board?
Yes.
And hey, maybe Microsoft comes out with the auto, here's everything, kind of tool, but we'll see when that happens. Maybe that's the next gen Fabric V2.
I think, but I really think you're hitting on something that is becoming increasingly important for organizations. While the Power BI ecosystem, and I'm talking more about the Power BI side at this point, I'm not talking about the other Fabric elements right now. I had other comments around this right now. We'll come to those in a minute. But if we think about just the Power BI side, with this Jevons Paradox, with the reduced cost to build, create, you're going to get a lot more. So the for lack of a better term, the pile of trash can continue to increase in size. So
Right.
it's the challenge for organizations now is quickly changing into what is really adding value. Because we can create if you have one creator versus 100 creators, right? You're going to get a lot of stuff made, right? So, okay.
Pollution.
Exactly. There's now pollution occurring in your analytics. So how do we have a consistent story of the truth? How many enterprise data models should we be maintaining? And what do those look like? So I firmly believe I've worked with some organizations where we've basically taken all of their production data and wrapped it up into 2 or 3 solid models. And every aspect of their business is being touched by a couple different aspects, by engineering the data to get into 2 or 3 solid models. Now, granted, there's a lot of edge cases. Organizations are big. Every department has their own kind of unique needs. But at the core of what you're doing, the business is simple enough, or the business can be thought of in a way that says, okay, look, we need to highlight, and from this, again, lack of a better term here, I don't know a better way of saying it, but from this pile of trash, let's highlight the gems. Where's the diamonds in the rough in our analytics space, and how do we, one, identify them, mature them so they become elevated above everything else, and get people to understand that that is the story of the truth, and how do we highlight those? And this is where I think, when I look at what Microsoft's building for One Lake Data Hub, it kind of is part of that. Right? Here's a whole bunch of data sets you have access to. Here's the ones that are certified, right? They're trying, and here's what domains take over. Domains help you group things together. We're already trying to group this piles together so we can add value.
Well, there's a kink in the armor there, and in honor of week 1, and now Jordan Love being the next Aaron honor, and hot takes kind of thing, overreaction.
Oh man.
I feel like honestly the truth, which my gosh, it's wait, I guess we have to wait till Jordan Love's gone now for the Bears. But honestly, I really think thinking about where Power BI is now introducing Fabric, I think a lot of those problems, Mike, are because that it's kind of twofold. Organizations are not willing to invest at the time the technology is changing in what the governance and what the quality is, whether they're not aware of what the technology's capabilities are at the time it's introduced, much less then adapt and react to it. And I think the technology is moving so rapidly. I would true or false statement, or if you would say this is an overreaction, the statement that most organizations are still behind in data governance just in Power BI alone.
I'm going to say true, but I'm going to refine your statement.
Okay.
The data culture of organizations is being far outstripped by the technology at this point. The technology can do what it needs to provide a strong and solid data culture. And the reason I'm saying this is because the number of organizations I walk into, and they're like, we have professional engineers that know how to do Power BI. And I'm like, well, great. Show me what you do. And they're like, we tell everyone to go to the web and build reports. I'm not quite sure building reports in the web is like what I would call a Power BI professional. You're getting stuff done, I agree. But to me, that's the very low end of things you need to know about Power BI. It's a very limiting feature set of what all of Power BI can do. You're skipping a lot of modeling and custom building a desktop. You're not even giving people a desktop. Like, what's going on here? So like organizations are overrating how capable their people are because they don't even have a standard to measure their people against. And this is where, Seth, you made the skills matrix a while ago, talking about like more about the report and modeling experience. This was super helpful because people can actually evaluate where they're at in the scale and what skills should they know, or what skills do they know, and where they can place themselves as far as how mature they are in that space.
Your point here is, I think, further ahead than I would be, right? You're speaking, or at least the way I heard what you said, it came off that we're dealing with the pollution and you're already navigating some of the governance and strategies conversations. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen.
Sure.
But if AI is the driver for efficiencies in data, that I would argue that the challenges that we're talking about haven't even remotely started. Like if you think we have problems now with pollution, right?
That's true. I would agree.
AI would drive this so far down that the user base for reporting tools and accessing and working with data is going to explode like we've never seen before.
That's so I wasn't thinking about where AI fits into this, but you're really right. I would agree with that statement. The AI is going to continue to throw gas on the fire, and you're now going to have even more proliferation of this. Because I don't even have to think about the DAX.
Leads me, right? Yeah. Where this leads me into thinking is longer term strategy, right? Like if we're already having these challenges and conversations, like what would happen if 25% more of my organization is now polluting that environment, and I don't have a plan or a strategy on how to attack that?
Seth, from the AI limelight, are you saying this from the builder, the BI team, or the author point of view, or are you saying this from the consumer point of view? How that AI, in a sense, has that effect? Because I can see it both ways of having like implications we're not aware of.
I'm saying you would transform all of your consumers into builders.
I see.
Like the capability skill set. The skill sets are so far reduced because you've interjected tool sets or systems, and in this case it's AI. Help me build this report. I want to sit down in an interface and like in the pictures, right, that even Microsoft has shown, like generate me a report that shows me this and this and this and this and this. Bam. Magical, right? Like I'm not saying we're ever going to get there, nor do I know, but at the same time, like if that is the case, or those capabilities do arise in some way, shape, or form, I'm a consumer. I don't need you as a developer. What I need to do is go build my own reports. The artifacts and how that report gets generated on the back end will certainly still be the same. And you need people to validate it, understand it, ensure that it's accurate. Like, where does the data come from? Like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just saying, like, that's a lot of pollution, right? Or potentially could be, that would have to be somehow fit into a, some sort of review process, I think. Or how do you ensure that people don't make things on their own anymore and it only comes from curated data sets? It'd be interesting to see if like the data professional realm changes from doing report building to almost always and only doing curated data sets, right?
Because I think that's where it's going to go.
Technically, as long as these things should fit together, I could see AI systems understanding how they bolt in, or us telling them how to, so that exponentially there's a lot more usage of that data in many different ways.
And you can't say we're not close to that yet, because I did another test with that Cruiser AI tool.
Yeah, but that's the interesting other part of this, right? Where technology is already way out in front of business, like Mike said, right? So the technology may like get there instantly, but at the same time, like it'll be interesting to see whether or not, because of the AI buzz, organizations dive into that immediately, do they? I mean, we're 7-8 years into Power BI, and we know organizations that are just starting to take that journey. So the adoption of new technologies has in the past not been so instantaneous, and it'll be interesting for me to see whether or not AI is different in that regard than other technological advancements.
So I guess with the introduction of AI and these easy tools, and I want to see this calculation and AI can generate it, how do we make sure then, or maybe not how do we make sure, but how can kind of a business ensure that like the human element remains still like integral with both that interaction with data and the business?
And I want to answer your question, Tommy, but I also want to go.
Yeah.
I also want to kind of make another note here as well around this. Is going. I feel like AI can do two things. Well, it does more than two things, but I'm just saying like there's two areas where I think improvements will be seen from AI. One is I think AI will help in the creation of models. AI will help in the engineering of the data, right? Tommy, you were saying like, look, I use this Cruiser AI. It helps me write DAX statements. I can literally point it at a page from, here's DAX.guide, right? So now I can find the best sources of information around data, and then it knows now, okay, here's all the articles from SQL BI, here's all the articles around DAX.guide. It uses them as reference points to then scan that and produce to me answers from there, which is amazing. So, I see this
kind of creepy how good it was. So,
and then, we see things like coming out from Marco Russo and SQL BI team. There's now the DAX optimizer, right? They're probably doing some sort of, maths or AI pieces behind the scenes of that to kind of, figure out what's going on there. So really cool, very neat technology, but that's all about the creation of the data side of things. Seth, I think what you were alluding to was another part of AI that is, it's around how do I provide the insights? Like, I'm just going to throw AI a cube. Here's my data model. AI should be able to go through that and say, here's things that are interesting you may want to know about it. And I'm not sure if we're there yet. I don't think I've seen a very solid example of throwing a bunch of information and data at an AI and having it produce lots of charts, graphs, or insightful pieces of data. But I don't imagine we're too far away from throwing a data model at an AI and saying, why are my sales down? I mean, I think there's some things that are like Data Robot, and there's maybe a couple other ones that are kind of doing similar things. But I question, when I see these things, I question the validity of what we're actually getting out of it, right? And is it done in an efficient way? So I don't know if I can really vouch for these other tools yet because I haven't spent enough time to really know, are they going to be able to create the insightful pieces? But what I will say is there are patterns in how you want to represent data. Like, I want to talk about position and direction. I want to talk about, sum of sales broken down by various categories. So where I do think AI could help out is I could give it some prompts around, I care about these kind of columns. I care about these kind of calculations. And then what the AI does is it just runs away and it builds 15, 20, 30 different visuals for you and comes back and says, here's a whole bunch of visuals that may answer certain kinds of questions. Now, if the AI can start matching, let's say, look, it's part of the features in desktop where you say, explain the increase, explain the decrease on bar charts. That is probably one of the more relevant features I see from AI that Microsoft has produced in desktop that seems useful to me, right? That helps me. So doing more things like that, where businesses will be able to incorporate these technology pieces into their workflow, will be important. So let me answer your question directly, Tommy. How do you prepare a business to use these new, more modern AI-based technologies in what they do every day? I think it has to be a strategic and slowly thought out thing to some degree, because with the introduction of AI, you have a harder time discerning what is truth, what is really real, what is, I was using AI the other day. I said, I had a blob of text. It was awesome. I had a blob of text. I threw a blob of text at the AI and said, add these numbers up. And it was just text and numbers and all this kind of random stuff. It was like from a statement of work I was writing, and it did a great job. It said, here's a way you can do this. And it literally found all the numbers in the article and it added them up. Here's how you could do this. And it added the numbers up. And my engineer who was working with this, he goes, check that math. I'm like, what do you mean check the math? He goes, check the math. And literally, it pulled out all the right numbers. It pulled them out. It literally listed them, 73 plus 5 plus 12 plus, it did the math, added all the numbers up and gave me an answer. The answer was wrong. So it wrote out the entire statement of the math,
great, yeah.
but the answer was incorrect. So I literally copied the text from, okay, great. It parsed out all the numbers for me, no problem. I parsed out all the additional, the math part, and put it in Google and hit go, and I got the right number. I did it again on a second set of data, and it did it correctly. The math actually worked out correctly. So it's subtle things like this. If you're not really in tune, if you're not really paying attention, like, where do you check the AI to make sure that it didn't just make something up arbitrarily? It could have. It may have found something in the article and then misrepresented the addition at the end of it. Like it did so good and got to the very last step and then fell over. You know what I mean?
Sounds like my science projects.
Yeah. Tommy's volcano. It looked so good, and then the volcano just fizzled out the side, or had a leak at the bottom, and it never came out.
Interesting point there, and I don't want to divert too much. So, Seth, did you have something to say before? Okay, so the interesting thing with AI now is not necessarily, and to your point, not necessarily getting it right the first time, but one of the most powerful statements you can ask any prompt or whatever tool you're using is like, that's not what I wanted. I want to focus on this.
Yes.
And then it usually adapts. And that's actually
Correct.
really the strongest point. And I'm thinking about this in the context of like from the business to the data to AI to the data, or the business to AI. And I think that the point of that is like the dialogue, right? Where it's not just me saying, I want this, point out the spit out this. And I think our strongest point from the human element, or at least from, you think about where does AI fit, where does data now fit, or where does fabric fit, is also kind of being able to have a dialogue. Because I'm seeing too much right now, either still this top-down approach of here's how we're rolling everything out, business adapt to the new governance. Here's how the data you're going to get your data, adapt to how it's going to be. And there's a big part here on open dialogue and being more open, both from the business to the business intelligence team, or however that framework is. Because not that we have to copy what AI is doing in terms of what works, but if we're going to have this dialogue with AI, I think that needs to be a big part of us moving forward too.
I would agree with that, but at the same time, I almost think that like business always wants outputs, right? Whatever they're using, the output is something they pass on to somebody else, or they use it to make a decision. I think what'll be interesting is with the proliferation of AI tools, allowing business users to be like, hey, I want this, and an output being generated, that rather than developers building outputs for people, they'll probably review like the compilation. How did you go about getting this information? Does this make sense? Right? So rather than, so you're verifying and double checking, Mike, to your point, that the calculation adds up to what you would assume it would.
Correct.
But in the context of business, it would be, well, I know these things about the business and how the data is stored. And the other thing in here is AI, that where AI is going to get tripped up is how much innate just business logic garbage do we as employees know that isn't represented in the data anywhere?
Yes.
Like imagine brain dumping all of the things and why systems were set up the way they were and which flags mean this thing and these filter sets all have to be in this place except for this value, and that's what that is. All of that won't live, at least initially, in the back end for AI to understand or provide instantaneously, like magic, right? So I think there's a long way we're going to go before like everything's just so instantaneous and AI is going to solve all our world's problems, because innately a ton of that isn't in a computer. Probably for the detriment of the business too, but maybe it will be in the future.
I like this idea. This idea is amazing, because what Tommy said around being conversational, and what you said, Seth, around like there's this huge wealth of business knowledge that's
introducing the business knowledge back into the AI engine. Yeah.
So I think there's like a.
But then you get the sales and marketing. What's sales mean?
Well, very true. Like, well, and that's maybe where the AI can prompt things a bit more, right? Hey, describe the kind of calculation you're trying to produce. Well, I want to calculate this thing that adds all the sales for this region, excluding these things. Da, 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 da. Great. But as I think about that scenario, right? Why doesn't the AI have conversations with more business users? And what you start sifting out is the AI should be able to collect multiple requirements from multiple people all at the same time and start trying to figure out, okay, based on these 10 people and 10 people's worth of different requirements, the AI should be trying to figure out, okay, where's this center point of all these requirements? How, like, hey, I see there's this key column that has a weird ID, and the business user, oh yeah, that key column is this, and the business user describes the data, and then the AI says, great, I'll keep that for later on. The data, then the knowledge of the user gets put back into the AI stores it somewhere, and then the next person who asks about something, the AI brings up, hey, did you know there's a column over here that does exactly what you want based on this flagging, because it learned from the one conversation that it can now extrapolate new data for the next user. That's the golden ticket here.
Well, why aren't we having the conversations? Seth, you just said to me like the golden nugget here, where it's not just the output, where no one, and I will still say this, no one will spit out 15,000 in a report and make a decision. It's how did we get there? And it's always about like, whatever that final result is. Well, why did it get there? And that's kind of my last point, thinking about being open with the business. Let's talk about not just about your final number, but how did we get there?
Like that. And AI should do that. AI should tell us how to get there.
Your thought is another whole podcast for me, which is like you just maestroed me, man. Like where do I want to use AI?
Yeah.
Well, I want to use it as the requirements gathering engine.
Yeah.
I want to go build this. Here are all the people in the business units. Go figure out what they know. Like come
100%
and like generate these.
Summarize everything back to me.
Anyway,
yeah.
Love the conversation. I want to continue having. I think we're gonna have a lot more conversations around this. I love this article because it kind of twisted me on my axis and gave me a different perspective on the whole AI discussion. So it was a fun one.
I like that a lot as well. With that, we got to bounce. Thank you all very much for listening and watching the podcast. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much, chat audience. A lot of good thoughts there in the chat as well. So thank you very much for participating and jumping in with the conversation. If you like what we have here, if you like this information, if you like thinking about AI or Jevons Paradox or figuring out where does the intersection of data culture and data modeling fit in your organization, this is probably the podcast for you. We talk a lot about those things here. So if you like this, please share it with somebody else. Let somebody else know you had some value from this episode. And we'd love for you to share someone else. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
And we're on a time crunch. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever podcasts are sold. Make sure to join us live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if you have a topic, a question, or an idea you want us to talk about, go to powerbi.tips/podcast and you can submit a mailbag.
Just FYI, the podcast is free, so you don't have to go buy it. There's nothing.
Podcasts
are sold for free.
Podcasts are now apps.
Enjoy.
Sweet.
We'll see you all next time.